You're hungry right now, but it is not really a problem. You can open a fridge, tap a screen, or walk to a shop, and within minutes you will be holding more calories than your body needs for the whole day. You have probably never once wondered, seriously wondered, whether you will eat tomorrow. Now go back 30,000 years. Same hunger, same body, same need for food. But there is no fridge, no farm, no shop, and no promise that there is anything to eat at all. Some days the whole group eats like kings. Other days they walk for miles across frozen ground and come back with nothing, again. And the children lie down to sleep with empty stomachs and no idea when the next meal is coming. Starvation was not a rare disaster for your ancestors. It was a constant shadow, always just a few bad days away. And yet, they did not merely survive it. In one of the harshest worlds humans have ever lived in, they found enough food to keep going, generation after generation, all the way down to you. So what did they actually eat? Not the cartoon version with a caveman gnawing a giant drumstick, but the real, day-to-day food that kept your ancestors alive? The answer is stranger, grosser, and a lot smarter than you think. If you find this kind of thing fascinating, a like and a subscribe genuinely help a small channel like this one keep going. Let's kill the biggest myth first, because you have been sold a lie about your ancestors. When you picture a caveman's dinner, you probably picture meat. A huge slab of it, dripping over a roaring fire, torn apart by a bearded man with his bare hands. And yes, they ate meat, and they loved it. But the idea that your ancestors lived on nothing but giant, heroic hunts is mostly wrong. A big animal was a jackpot, not a meal plan. Bringing down something like a mammoth or a bison was rare, dangerous, and wildly unpredictable. You could not walk out every morning and count on it, any more than you could count on winning the lottery to pay your rent. Hunts failed far more often than they succeeded. People got hurt. Whole days ended with nothing. So for most of the time, the food that actually kept people alive came from something much less glamorous. It came from gathering. While the hunts got all the glory around the fire at night, it was the steady, patient, unglamorous work of foraging that filled most stomachs. Roots dug out of half-frozen ground with a sharpened stick. Nuts and seeds cracked open one by one. Berries in the short weeks they appeared. Wild greens, mushrooms, tubers, even the soft inner bark of certain trees. In many groups, the food gathered quietly day after day, often by the women, delivered more steady calories than the meat ever did. It is not a thrilling picture. Nobody paints a dramatic mural of someone kneeling in the dirt digging up a root. But that root was survival. The hunt was the gamble. The gathering was the paycheck. And here is the part that gets overlooked. Knowing which plants fed you and which ones would kill you was not instinct. It was a vast library of knowledge, carried entirely in human memory, learned through generations of trial, error, and death, and passed from elders to children who had to memorize it perfectly. Get one berry wrong, and you were gone. Now here is something that will flip how you think about their food completely. The single most valuable thing your ancestors could eat was not meat at all. It was fat. This sounds strange to you, because you live in a world that spent decades being told fat is the enemy. Your ancestors would have laughed at that, right before they died laughing. If all you eat is very lean meat, you can actually starve to death on a full stomach. Your body cannot run on protein alone. Without fat or some source of carbohydrate to burn, it begins to poison itself just trying to process all that protein. Explorers who tried to live on nothing but lean rabbit meat discovered this the hard way, and it has a name: rabbit starvation. You can eat and eat and eat and still waste away. Your ancestors did not know the biology, but they knew the rule deep in their bones. Fat kept you alive. Fat was gold. It was the most precious, most fought over, most craved thing in their entire diet. And that is why they did something you would probably never think to do. When the meat was gone and only the bare bones were left, they were not finished. They took rocks and they cracked those bones wide open to get at the marrow inside, the rich, greasy, fatty core sealed in the center. Most predators in that world simply could not reach it. A wolf can strip the meat, but it cannot smash a leg bone and drink what is hidden within. Your ancestors could, because they had tools. So while the scavengers fought over scraps, your ancestors walked away with the richest, most life-saving part of the whole animal. Cold, dense, greasy fuel that could carry a family through another freezing night. And now, for the part that will make you squirm, because every one of these videos has one. When times were hard, and honestly, even when they were not, your ancestors ate insects. Grubs, larvae, beetles, crickets, whatever was crawling, plentiful, and safe. And before you gag, understand exactly why this made them smart, not desperate. Think about it. Insects are everywhere. They do not run very fast. You do not need a spear or a hunting party or a single ounce of courage to gather them, which means a child or an elder could do it. And pound for pound, many of them are absolutely loaded with protein and fat, the two things your ancestors needed most. A handful of fat white grubs, to you, is pure nightmare fuel. To a hungry family in the Ice Age, it was a safe, easy, reliable meal that did not require risking anyone's life against a wild animal. Most of the world still eats insects today, on purpose, as good food. We are the strange ones for stopping. What looks disgusting to you was, for almost all of human history, simply dinner. Here is another thing that will surprise you. Your ancestors did not always hunt their meat. Sometimes they stole it. Getting fresh meat was so hard and so dangerous that grabbing an animal that was already dead was often the smarter move. They watched the sky for circling birds and the horizon for gathering predators, because both were signs of a fresh carcass somewhere. Then a group of humans would march in, drive off the wolves or the big cats that had done the killing, and take the prize for themselves. It was not noble, and it was not glamorous. But it worked. Being willing to eat what you did not kill, and to bully bigger predators off their meal, was another quiet trick that kept your bloodline fed. And when they did have a whole animal, nothing was wasted. Nothing. We tend to obsess over the muscle, the good cuts, the steak, and throw the rest away. Your ancestors would have thought you were out of your mind. The richest, most valuable parts were exactly the ones most people discard today. The organs, the liver, packed with more vitamins than almost any plant on Earth. The fat around the gut, the brain, the marrow. Every tendon and scrap boiled down for whatever goodness it held. A single large animal was not a meal. It was a warehouse on legs, giving fat, protein, vitamins, hide for clothing, bone for tools, and sinew for binding things together. To waste any part of it could mean death months later. But maybe the single most important thing your ancestors did with their food was not about what they ate at all. It was about what they did to it first. They cooked it. That sounds too obvious to matter, but cooking may be one of the most important things our species ever discovered. Fire begins breaking food down before you even put it in your mouth. It kills parasites and dangerous bacteria that could otherwise kill a child. It turns tough roots and stringy meat into something soft that surrenders far more of its energy. The exact same food, cooked, hands you far more usable calories than it does raw. And some scientists believe this changed everything about what we became. Cooking let our ancestors pull so much more energy out of their food that over a vast stretch of time, their guts could shrink and their brains could grow. In a strange and beautiful way, the same fire that kept them warm may have helped build the very brain you are using to understand these words right now. Your ancestors were not just cooking supper, they were quietly feeding the birth of the human mind. Now, here is something that sounds impossible, but the bones prove it. For all the hunger and all the danger, in the good times your ancestors very likely ate better than the farmers who came thousands of years after them. You would assume the story of food is a straight line upward, that every generation ate better than the last until we reached the buffet you live in today. It was not a straight line. When humans finally settled down and started farming, something surprising happened to their bodies. They got shorter. Their teeth got worse. Signs of disease and malnutrition show up in their skeletons far more than in the hunter-gatherers before them. Why? Because a farmer bets everything on a handful of crops. Your foraging ancestors ate dozens, sometimes hundreds of different foods across a year. A wildly varied diet of plants, meat, fat, fish, and insects that covered nearly everything the human body needs. When you eat a little of everything, you rarely go missing anything. Their meals were unpredictable and often scarce, but when the food was there, it was some of the most complete nutrition our species has ever eaten. The caveman was not a starving brute chewing gristle. In a good season, he was eating better than the king who came 10,000 years later. Still, for all their cleverness, none of this made food reliable. Their whole world ran on feast and famine. A big kill or a rich foraging season meant days of plenty, and they ate everything they could hold, because their own bodies were the only refrigerator they had. The fat they packed on in the good times was the fuel that carried them through the bad ones. And the bad times always came. Deep winter, a hunt that failed for weeks, a season when the herds moved on and every plant lay buried under snow. There were stretches when a family simply went hungry, tightening rawhide belts, gnawing on scraps, and waiting. Some of them did not make it to spring. In that world, every scrap of knowledge, where a hidden root grew, where nuts had been cached, where a frozen carcass might still be found, could be the razor-thin line between a group surviving and a group vanishing forever. But when luck turned their way, there were treasures. Honey was the sweetest prize in their entire world, a burst of pure energy unlike anything else they could find, worth climbing cliffs and enduring a storm of stings to reach. Where there was open water, there were fish and shellfish, sometimes so rich and abundant they could feed a whole camp. And slowly, cleverly, they learned to cheat time itself, drying and smoking meat so that a single lucky feast could keep feeding them weeks after the animal was gone. So what did ancient humans actually eat? The honest answer is everything. Whatever the land, the season, and their own hard-won knowledge could offer. Roots and marrow and grubs and greens and honey and fish, and every last scrap of every animal they were lucky enough to bring down or steal. Not because any of it was a delicacy, but because being picky in that world was simply a good way to die. And here is the part that ties all of it together. In a life of feast and famine, the single greatest protection against starving was not a better spear or a secret plant. It was each other. When one hunter finally succeeded, the whole group ate. When one family stumbled onto a patch of food, they shared it. Sharing food was not just kindness, it was survival insurance, an unspoken promise that when your luck ran out, Someone else's good day would keep you and your children alive. That is the thread running through every one of these stories. Your ancestors did not survive because any single one of them always found food. They survived because when one of them ate, the others ate too. You exist because a long line of hungry, clever, stubborn people refused to face that cold and that hunger alone, and shared what little they had. If that hit you the way it hit me, subscribe and stick around, because next time we are going back into that same brutal world to answer another question about how they actually pulled it off. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.